The year was 591, and the kingdom of Wessex stood on the brink of change. Ceawlin, the powerful king who had ruled with an iron fist for years, was suddenly deposed by his nephew, Ceol. The news spread like wildfire across the land, sending shockwaves through the hearts of the people. No one saw it coming. Ceol, the son of Ceawlin's brother Cutha, had always been in the shadows, but now he emerged to claim the throne. Ceol's reign was marked by relentless battles. He fought not just the neighboring tribes, but also the Britons, Picts, and Scots. The Chronicle, the ancient record of Wessex, tells us that Ceol continually fought and contended against these enemies. But the truth is, many of these battles were likely exaggerated or misremembered. The Picts and Scots were far to the north, and it's unlikely Ceol ever met them in battle. Still, the image of a warrior king was etched into the minds of the people, and it helped solidify his rule. After Ceol's death in 611, his brother Ceolwulf took the throne. Ceolwulf was a man of ambition, and he continued the tradition of warfare. The Chronicle mentions a battle at Bindon in 614, where the West Saxons emerged victorious, but the details are vague, and the location of Bindon remains a mystery. Despite this, the victory was celebrated as a great triumph, and it strengthened Ceolwulf's hold on the kingdom. In 611, Cynegils, the son of either Ceol or Ceolwulf, ascended to the throne. Cynegils was a shrewd ruler, and he faced a new threat, the Mercians. The kingdom of Mercia was expanding rapidly, and its king, Penda, was a formidable foe. In 628, Cynegils and Penda fought over the control of Cirencester, a strategic town in the north. The battle was intense, and the outcome uncertain, but it marked the beginning of a long and bitter rivalry between Wessex and Mercia. Cynegils sought an alliance to counter the Mercian threat. He found it in the powerful kingdom of Northumbria. In 635, Cynegils was baptized by Oswald, the Christian king of Northumbria, and sealed the alliance with a marriage between his daughter and Oswald. This move was both political and religious, as it brought the West Saxons closer to the Christian faith and secured a powerful ally against the Mercians. Cynegils' son, Cenwalh, succeeded him in 642. Cenwalh, however, had a different approach. He remained a pagan and married a sister of Penda, the Mercian king. This alliance was short-lived, and Cenwalh soon repudiated his wife. Penda retaliated by driving Cenwalh out of his kingdom, forcing him to seek refuge with the East Angles. Cenwalh regained his throne in 648, but the damage was done. The relationship with Mercia was strained, and the West Saxons had to be wary of their northern neighbors. In 661, Penda's son Wulfr launched a devastating raid on Ashdown, deep in West Saxon territory. This attack was a clear sign that the Mercians were not to be underestimated. In response, Cenwalh established a new bishopric at Winchester, likely to strengthen his control over the southern parts of his kingdom. The move was strategic, as Winchester was closer to the Mercian border and more secure than the previous see at Dorchester-on-Thames. The West Saxons continued to expand their territories, gradually pushing westward into British lands. By the time of Cædwalla's reign, Wessex had grown significantly. Cædwalla, a descendant of Ceawlin, was a fierce warrior who had been exiled from Wessex in the 680s. He returned with a vengeance, gathering an army and conquering the South Saxons, Surrey, and the Jutish provinces in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. His reign was brutal, marked by the slaughter of the royal house of Wight and the imposition of heavy tributes on the conquered lands. Despite his ruthlessness, Cædwalla was a man of deep faith. In 688, he abdicated his throne to be baptized in Rome, where he died soon after. His successor, Ine, continued to build on Cædwalla's successes. Ine was a wise and just ruler who lost control of Kent, but maintained his hold over the South Saxons and other provinces. He was also a patron of the church, founding new monasteries and supporting the integration of British and Anglo-Saxon communities. One of Ine's most significant achievements was the creation of a lawcode, which laid out the duties of the king and the rights of his subjects. The laws were a mix of practical and religious guidelines, reflecting the growing Christian influence in Wessex. They also showed that the West Saxons were becoming a more organized and structured society, capable of managing a large and diverse kingdom. Ine's reign also saw the rise of Hamwic, a trading settlement on the Southampton Peninsula. Hamwic was a bustling hub of commerce, with thousands of people engaged in various crafts and trades. The king's support was crucial in establishing and maintaining this thriving community, which played a vital role in the economic growth of Wessex. As the kingdom of Wessex grew stronger, the West Saxons faced new challenges and opportunities. The legacy of their early rulers, from Ceawlin to Ine, shaped the future of their people. The kingdom was no longer a small, isolated tribe, but a powerful force in the land, ready to face whatever the future held. The reigns of the West Saxon kings who ruled in the 8th century are not as well documented as that of King Ine, who ruled from 688 to 726. Despite this, we can still piece together some interesting details about these kings and their times. After Ine, the throne was taken by Ethelred, who ruled from 726 to 740. Ethelred, along with the kings who followed him, Cuthred, 740 to 756, Sigebert, 756 to 757, Cynewulf, 757 to 786, and Beorhtric, 786 to 802, are all said to be descendants of Cerdic, the founder of the West Saxon dynasty. However, their family trees are not very clear, and we don't have much detailed information about their genealogies. One of the most interesting events from this period is a feud between King Cynewulf and Cyneherd, the brother of King Sigebert. Cynewulf had deposed Sigebert to become king, and in 757, he decided to get rid of Cyneherd as well. However, Cyneherd caught Cynewulf off guard when the king was visiting a mistress and killed him. Cynewulf's loyal followers rushed to avenge their king, refusing to be bribed by Cyneherd. They fought bravely and were killed, but the next day, more of Cynewulf's followers arrived and continued the fight. They refused to make peace with Cyneherd, saying that no kinsman was more important to them than their lord. In the end, Cynewulf's loyal followers had their revenge. This story is a good example of the heroic code that was important in Anglo-Saxon society. None of these kings were as powerful as Ine, but they faced significant challenges, especially from the kingdom of Mercia. Ethelred, for instance, lost control of parts of Somerset and Wiltshire to the Mercians under King Aethelbald. However, his successor, Cuthred, fought back and defeated Aethelbald in 752, regaining control of North Somerset and North Wiltshire. The border between Wessex and Mercia was a constant source of conflict, especially during Cynewulf's reign. Cynewulf initially had the upper hand, but after losing a battle to Offa of Mercia in 779, he lost control of parts of Berkshire, North Wiltshire, and the Bath area. Despite these setbacks, Cynewulf remained an independent ruler. In 786, when the papal envoys attended a synod in Canterbury, both Offa and Cynewulf were recognized as co-rulers. Cynewulf also seems to have revitalized the economy of Hamwic, a town that had suffered during the mid-8th century due to competition from Mercia. When Cynewulf was killed in 786, Offa of Mercia increased his influence over Wessex. The new king, Beorhtric, either came to the throne with Offa's help or quickly fell under his influence. In 789, Beorhtric married Offa's daughter, Eadba, which solidified the alliance. Offa helped Beorhtric deal with troublemakers, including the future King Egbert, who was exiled. Beorhtric also introduced new administrative practices, such as the first silver pennies, which were modeled after those in Mercia. The West Saxons continued to expand westward, particularly at the expense of the British. In 743, Aethelbald of Mercia and Cuthred of Wessex fought together against the British, though it's not clear which group they were fighting. Cynewulf is known to have faced resistance from the Cornish, and the chronicle records that he often fought with great battles against the British. The kings of this period were also patrons of religious communities, especially in the Sherborne diocese, and supported the missions to convert the pagan Germans on the continent. The lack of detailed sources from this period might suggest a decline in Wessex, but this is not necessarily the case. Although Wessex often had to recognize Mercian overlordship, it remained an independent kingdom. The kings of the 8th century faced similar challenges to their predecessors, and there is no evidence to suggest a reduction in their power. The consolidation of 7th century gains in Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, and the southwest continued, and the replacement of British place names with English ones in areas like Devon, Dorset, and Somerset indicates the growing dominance of the Anglo-Saxons. The pattern of kingship in Wessex during this period suggests a complex system of rival lineages within the royal house. The Chronicle and other sources indicate that any adult male who could claim descent from Cerdic was eligible to be king, and these candidates were known as Aetheling. However, the genealogies are not consistent, and historians debate whether all the kings were truly members of the same royal house. Despite these discrepancies, the early members of the royal house consistently used names beginning with the letter C, suggesting a strong family connection. The practice of multiple kingship was also common in Wessex. In addition to the main rulers, other individuals bore the title of king or subking. Some of these, like Ceawlin and Cuthred, were close kinsmen of the main rulers and may have shared power. For example, Cynegils and Ceawlin are often mentioned together as leaders of the West Saxon forces, suggesting they might have been joint rulers. Ine, for instance, seems to have shared power with his father, Cenwalh, in the early years of his reign. The existence of subkings also suggests that Wessex was divided into provinces, each governed by a member of the royal house. For example, Cenwalh gave his kinsman Cuthred control over a large area near Ashdown, and Ine had subkings like Cissa and Baldred who governed specific regions. This system of subkingship was a way for the main rulers to maintain control over the various provinces that made up the kingdom. Overall, the 8th century in Wessex was marked by internal conflicts, external threats, and the gradual consolidation of power. Despite the challenges, the West Saxon kings managed to maintain their independence and continue the expansion of their kingdom. In the early days of Wessex, the kingdom was often a patchwork of smaller territories ruled by different members of the royal family. These subkings, who controlled various provinces, sometimes shared power with the main king. This system made the kingdom complex and often led to disputes over who should rule. One of the best examples of a royal family tied to a specific area is the family of Alfred the Great, who had strong connections to Dorset. Ine, a king of Wessex, granted land in Dorset to build a monastery. Ine's sister Cuthba founded a double monastery at Wimborne. Later, Ine set up a new bishopric in Sherborne. Even though the family's influence waned for a while in the 8th century, they remained deeply connected to Dorset in the 9th century. 2 of Alfred's brothers were buried at Sherborne, and another, Aethelred, was buried at Wimborne. Alfred himself founded a nunnery for one of his daughters at Shaftesbury. When one of Aethelred's sons tried to claim the throne after Alfred's death, he launched his campaign by taking control of Wimborne and its nunnery. This shows how important these religious sites were to the family's power and heritage. The system of rulership in early Wessex was complex. Most of the time there was a dominant king, but there were instances of joint kingship, where power was shared among close relatives. Below the main king, there were subkings who controlled smaller areas. Some of these subkings were close family members, while others were more distant relatives with a hereditary right to rule certain regions. This system worked well until the death of King Cenwalh in 673, when it seemed to break down. According to the historian Bede, multiple subkings took control, dividing the kingdom and ruling for about 10 years. This period was likely very chaotic, with different rulers vying for power. Around this time, a new system began to emerge. King Ine, who ruled from 688 to 726, introduced the concept of ealdormen, who were like regional governors. These ealdormen, often referred to as patricius, princeps, or prefectus, were in charge of shires, which were administrative regions. The exact number of ealdormen varied, but it seems there were usually about 7. This new system replaced the subkings and helped centralize power under the main king. However, it didn't stop rivalries within the royal family. Different branches of the royal house still claimed the right to rule, and these disputes often led to conflict. Women in the royal family also played significant roles. Ceawlin, the widow of King Cenwalh, is the only Anglo-Saxon queen to appear in a Rignal list as a ruler. Aethelba, the wife of King Ine, and Frithegith, the wife of King Ethelherd, are mentioned in historical records. Aethelberht, in particular, is known for demolishing Taunton, a city her husband had built. This act, though not well understood, suggests she had considerable power. Queens often made land grants alongside their husbands, and sometimes in their own right. Eadbar, the wife of King Beorhtric, was particularly influential, possibly because she was the daughter of Offa, the powerful king of Mercia. The 8th century saw a new phase in West Saxon history. King Egbert, who ruled from 802 to 839, was a descendant of King Ine's brother, Ingild. His reign began with a campaign against the Cornish in 815. In 825, Egbert defeated King Beornwulf of Mercia at the Battle of Ellendun, and by the end of the year he had control over Kent, Surrey, Sussex, and Essex. In 829, he invaded Mercia and ruled it for a year, earning him the title of Bretwalda, a term meaning overlord. However, his control over Mercia and Northumbria was short-lived, and by 830 he had lost significant authority in these regions. Egbert's most significant achievement was securing the throne for his descendants. His son, Aethelwulf, ruled after him, and Aethelwulf was followed by his sons Aethelbald, Aethelbert, Aethelred, and Alfred. This level of family dominance was unprecedented in Wessex. Egbert's new conquests brought him great wealth, which he used to secure support. He made grants to the churches in Winchester and Canterbury, likely on the condition that the bishops supported his heirs. The importance of church support was crucial, as they performed the consecration ceremonies that legitimized new kings and helped enforce royal decisions. Egbert and his son Aethelwulf were generous to the church, but also ensured they maintained control over the lands they granted. They were careful to get acknowledgement that they were the lords of the Kentish monasteries, successor to the Kentish royal house. Over time, many estates that once belonged to monasteries came into their hands. Alfred's will shows a similar strategy, where female relatives received estates for their lifetime, but the land would return to the male line after their deaths. This careful balance between generosity and wealth preservation was essential for maintaining power and influence. The Egbertings understood the need to consolidate their personal wealth. They were generous to the church, but also kept a close eye on their resources. Alfred, in particular, was known for his careful management of wealth. Asser, a close friend and chronicler of Alfred, described how Alfred would assess his revenues and plan his expenditures carefully. This careful management helped ensure the stability and success of the West Saxon kingdom. The royal family of Wessex, led by King Aethelwulf, was not just a group of powerful men, but a family with its own set of rules and agreements. Aethelwulf, who ruled Wessex in the 9th century, made sure to leave a will that outlined how his sons, Aethelbald, Aethelred, and Alfred, would inherit his lands and possibly the kingdom. According to the will, the longest living brother would inherit the family possessions in western Wessex, while Aethelbert was already provided for in the eastern part of the kingdom. When Aethelbald died in 860, Aethelbert took over as king, but he made a deal with his younger brothers that they would inherit the lands after him. When Aethelbert died in 865, Aethelred and Alfred reached a similar agreement. Aethelred would have the family estates during his lifetime, but Alfred would inherit everything after Aethelred's death, even before Aethelred's own son. When Aethelred died in 871, Alfred became the king and the heir to the family's wealth. To secure his position, Alfred had the West Saxon nobles ratify his agreement with Aethelred, ensuring the continuation of his line. However, even with these precautions, family conflicts were hard to avoid. In 855, Aethelwulf went on a pilgrimage to Rome, leaving his sons Aethelbald and Aethelbert to rule the different parts of Wessex. When he returned in 856, Aethelwulf brought a young bride, Judith, daughter of the Frankish king Charles the Bald. Aethelbald, with the support of important figures, rebelled against his father's return. A compromise was reached, and Aethelwulf ruled the eastern half of Wessex, while Aethelbald ruled the western half. It's unclear if this rebellion was due to Aethelbald's opposition to his father's policies, or his fear of being replaced if Aethelwulf and Judith had a son. Despite these internal issues, the West Saxon rulers faced significant external threats, especially from the Vikings. The first Viking raid on Wessex happened during King Beorhtric's reign, but serious attacks began in 836. The West Saxons initially had some success against the Vikings, but after 851, they struggled, and a Viking army even wintered in Thanet. Alfred's 4 elder brothers likely died during these campaigns, and by 865, the West Saxons had been fighting the Vikings for over a decade. The Vikings focused on conquering northern England, but they still posed a significant threat to Wessex. 871 was a critical year for the West Saxons, with 9 battles against the Vikings. Ethelred died during the campaign, and Alfred took over. In 878, Alfred faced a surprise Viking attack and was forced to retreat to the Somerset marshes. However, he rallied his forces and won a decisive victory at Edington, leading to a peace treaty with the Viking leader Guthrum. In 886, Alfred recaptured London from the Vikings, and although he didn't regain all the lost territories, this victory was seen as a sign that the Vikings' threat was under control. Alfred also successfully defended against a new Viking army between 892 and 896. The Viking Wars brought new challenges and demands on the West Saxon people. Building and maintaining fortresses, or bars, became crucial. These fortresses served as local refuges and bases for the militia to intercept Viking forces. The task of building and manning these fortresses was a significant burden on the local population, and there was resentment. Alfred had to work hard to convince his subjects of the necessity of these measures. The Vikings also operated in Francia, and the Franks built similar fortifications. The common threat brought the Frankish and West Saxon royal houses closer. Ceolwulf married Judith, and later Alfred married his daughter Elfrith to Count Baldwin II of Flanders. These alliances strengthened ties and brought cultural influences from Francia to Wessex. One of the most significant cultural impacts was the Carolingian Renaissance. Alfred, inspired by the high standards of Christian culture in Francia, brought scholars like Grimbald and John the Old Saxon to his court. Alfred himself translated important Latin texts into English, including works by Pope Gregory and Boethius, to educate his subjects and raise the standards of literacy and Christian knowledge. Alfred's reign was marked by his efforts to galvanize his people against the Vikings. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which celebrated past West Saxon victories, was part of this effort. Alfred's success in defeating the Vikings and his focus on education and Christian duty made him a revered figure. His victories and leadership not only secured his kingdom, but also laid the foundation for his son Edward to expand the West Saxon realm further. The Viking threat, while formidable, ultimately benefited the West Saxons. The great heathen army removed other Anglo-Saxon rulers, leaving Alfred as the only Christian king in England. Alfred's son Edward, with the help of his sister Ethelfled, defeated the remaining Viking settlers and added more territories to the West Saxon kingdom. The increased control and public burdens Alfred implemented to fight the Vikings became permanent, contributing to the success of his descendants as kings of England. Looking back on West Saxon history, it's clear that 4 reigns stand out as times when Wessex really gained strength and power, those of Ceawlin, Cædwalla, Ine, and Alfred. But there's a bit of a twist. Alfred, Ine, and Cædwalla were all related to Ceawlin, and the stories we have about these kings were written during Alfred's time. This makes some people wonder if the chroniclers wanted us to believe that Wessex did best when ruled by Alfred's family. However, we have other documents from different times that also speak highly of Ceawlin, Cædwalla, and Ine, so it seems they really were important rulers who expanded Wessex. There were other kings like Cynegils, who might have been just as important but are not mentioned much in the histories. Cynegils was from a different branch of the royal family, and the chroniclers might have downplayed his achievements to make Alfred's family look better. Despite this, we know from other sources that Cynegils was a significant ruler. In the late 500s, the West Saxons lived in the Thames Valley and had the chance to expand in many directions. However, the rise of Mercia to the north made them focus on the south and west. Cædwalla's conquests of the Jutes and South Saxons were seen as a turning point for Wessex. He was the first to use the title King of the Saxons, instead of King of the Gewissae. The West Saxons claimed they had a right to rule these areas because their ancestors, Cerdic and Cynric, had conquered them first. Whether this is true or not, It shows how the West Saxons tried to justify their expansion. Wessex also grew by moving westward, though we don't have as many details about this part of their history. They took over the lands and church organizations they found, but there is little information about how the Anglo-Saxons and the Britons interacted. The West Saxons might have married into British families and adopted some of their traditions, which could have helped them rule the new territories more smoothly. Wessex was the only kingdom to survive intact until the end of the 800s. It wasn't the biggest or richest, and its kings didn't seem to have more power than those in other kingdoms, but Wessex had a few advantages. Alfred was a skilled leader who learned from the successes of other kingdoms, including the advanced systems of government in Carolingian Francia. He also had the benefit of 300 years of Anglo-Saxon rule to build upon. When the Vikings attacked, Alfred's military and diplomatic skills helped him protect his kingdom and eventually become the king of all England. When we look at the history of different Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, we see common challenges and themes. One of these is the idea of kingship and overlordship. Anglo-Saxon kings started as war leaders who gained power during the breakdown of Roman rule. They used their military strength to establish kingdoms, and sometimes to dominate other kingdoms. The most powerful of these were called Bretwaldas, and included kings like Ceol of the South Saxons, Ceawlin of Wessex, and Ethelbert of Kent. They ruled over other kings and collected tribute, which was like a form of tax. The Bretwaldas' power was based on military force. They would attack other kingdoms, make them pay tribute, and sometimes demand military service. However, this power was often short-lived. Kings like Oswiu of Northumbria gained and lost overlordship within a few years. They had to constantly be on guard against rivals and keep their armies ready. Despite this, some kingdoms like Northumbria managed to expand their territory by absorbing smaller British kingdoms, which helped them remain strong even after losing their overlordship. To turn a tribute-paying kingdom into a permanent part of their own, kings had to use careful strategies. They would often marry into the ruling families of the smaller kingdoms, appoint sub-kings from their own family, and provide support to important religious institutions. This helped them gain loyalty and integrate the new territories into their own kingdom. In the end, it was through these methods, combined with skilled leadership and military success, that the West Saxon rulers became the kings of all England.